Imagine running a simple errand only to disappear without a trace. This is the chilling story of Patricia Copta, a woman who walked into a store and was never seen again, until 30 years later, when the truth shocked everyone. Patricia Copta, a resident of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, was known for her vibrant personality and deep religious convictions. Often referred to as the Sparrow due to her slight build, she was a familiar figure on the streets, sharing her spiritual insights and warning of impending events. On a typical day in 1992, Patricia left her home, mentioning plans to visit a local store. That evening, her husband, Bob Copta, returned to find their home empty. Hours turned into days, and with no word from Patricia, Bob reported her missing. The initial investigation into Patricia's disappearance yielded few clues. Friends and family were interviewed, and local areas were searched, but there was no sign of her. As months passed without any leads, the case grew cold. Bob, holding on to hope, placed advertisements in Puerto Rican newspapers, recalling Patricia's fondness for the island from vacations prior to their marriage. Despite his efforts, there was no response. In 1999, 7 years after Patricia's disappearance, authorities in Puerto Rico encountered a woman wandering the streets of northern Puerto Rico. She appeared disoriented and was taken in as a person in need to an adult care home. Diagnosed with dementia, she offered limited information about her past. Over time, as her condition progressed, she began to share fragments of her earlier life, mentioning her upbringing in Pennsylvania. In 2022, a social worker at the care home, intrigued by the details Patricia shared, contacted Interpol and the Ross Township Police Department in Pennsylvania. After a series of communications and a 9-month identification process involving DNA testing and dental record analysis, it was confirmed that the woman was indeed Patricia Copta. The revelation was both astonishing and bittersweet for her family. Bob, who had never remarried, expressed relief, stating, "It's a sad thing, but it's a relief off my mind. When your wife goes missing, you're a suspect." Patricia's sister, Gloria Smith, traveled to Puerto Rico to reunite with her after 3 decades. The emotional meeting provided some closure to a family that had been left with unanswered questions for so long. The circumstances surrounding Patricia's decision to leave and her life over the past 30 years remain largely unknown, adding another layer of mystery to her story. This case highlights the complexities of missing person investigations and the profound impact on families left behind. It underscores the importance of continued efforts in searching for missing individuals, as unexpected resolutions can occur even after decades. Patricia Copta's story serves as a poignant reminder of the enduring hope and the unpredictable nature of such cases. Patricia Copta was born in 1938 and lived a quiet life in Ross Township, Pennsylvania, just outside Pittsburgh. Known for her strong religious beliefs, she often walked the streets sharing spiritual messages and warning others of what she believed were imminent catastrophic events. Her petite build and delicate demeanor earned her the nickname the Sparrow among those who knew her. At 52 years old, Patricia lived with her husband Bob in a modest home filled with memories of their shared life. On a summer afternoon in June 1992, Patricia left her house to run a simple errand at a local department store. She told Bob she wouldn't be long. She stepped out wearing a floral dress, carrying a small handbag, and disappeared into the bright Pennsylvania sun. Hours passed and Bob began to worry when she didn't return. He called friends, neighbors, and anyone who might have seen her, but no one had. He drove to the department store, checking the parking lot and speaking to employees, but there was no trace of Patricia. By the time night fell, worry turned to panic. Early the next morning, Bob reported her missing to the Ross Township Police Department. The police began their search immediately, combing the area around the department store and speaking to anyone who might have seen her. Flyers were posted across the community, showing Patricia's picture and pleading for information. Days turned into weeks, but no leads surfaced. Bob was desperate. He made public appeals for Patricia's safe return, appearing at press conferences and pleading for help. Investigators scrutinized his every move, as is often the case with missing persons. Bob cooperated fully, but suspicion weighed heavily on him. Friends and neighbors who once stood by his side began to pull away. Months passed with no answers. Tips trickled in, but led nowhere. A sighting at a nearby bus station turned out to be a false alarm. A cryptic letter claiming she was being held against her will yielded nothing. Even a psychic who offered to help had no useful information. Bob refused to give up. He placed ads in local and international newspapers, focusing on Puerto Rico, a place Patricia had always loved during their vacations. Despite his efforts, there was no response. 7 years later, in 1999, Patricia was declared legally dead. But Patricia had not died. 7 years after she disappeared, a disoriented woman appeared in northern Puerto Rico. She wandered the streets, quoting scripture and speaking to strangers. Local authorities took her in, recognizing that she needed help. She was placed in a care home and diagnosed with dementia. Over time, she began to share fragments of her life, mentioning her upbringing in Pennsylvania. These details intrigued a social worker, but there was no way to confirm her identity. In 2022, after decades of silence, the care home reached out to Interpol and the Ross Township Police Department. The details matched Patricia's missing person case, and an investigation began. DNA testing confirmed her identity 9 months later. Patricia was alive. For Bob, who had never remarried, the news brought mixed emotions. Relief that she was safe, but heartbreak for the years lost. Her sister traveled to Puerto Rico to reunite with her after 30 years, an emotional moment that offered a glimmer of closure to a decades-long mystery. What drove Patricia to leave remains unclear. Whether it was a decision shaped by her mental health or something else entirely, much of her story remains untold. But after 30 years of uncertainty, her family finally had an answer. Patricia Copta was a deeply complex and intriguing woman, a combination of quiet determination and fervent belief. Known for her unwavering faith, she was a woman of habit and conviction. Her days were often spent sharing her religious insights with anyone willing to listen. Despite her eccentric reputation in the small, close-knit community of Ross Township, she was regarded with a certain warmth and respect. People admired her courage to speak her mind, even if they didn't always agree with her predictions or teachings. Patricia's life wasn't without its struggles. Her mother had passed away when Patricia was young, leaving her to grow up with her father and siblings in a household that valued discipline and hard work. She carried those values into adulthood, becoming a teacher, a career she found fulfilling. However, after years of teaching, she felt compelled to leave her profession, citing the stress of the job and the desire to focus on her faith. Her marriage to Bob Copta was a partnership of mutual respect. Bob was a practical and steady presence in her life, balancing her passionate and sometimes erratic tendencies. They met in their late 30s and quickly formed a bond, united by their shared belief in a life of purpose. Although they didn't have children, they built a life that revolved around each other and their small home in Ross Township. Bob often joked that Patricia brought color to his otherwise simple life. Ross Township in the early 1990s was a suburban haven, a quiet and peaceful place where everyone seemed to know each other. The streets were lined with modest houses, small businesses, and family-owned diners. The local department store where Patricia was last seen was a community staple, a place where people shopped for necessities and occasionally gathered for casual conversations. On the surface, it was the kind of town where nothing extraordinary ever happened, and that's what made Patricia's disappearance so shocking. On the day she vanished, the store was bustling with activity, typical for a weekday afternoon. Employees recalled seeing Patricia browsing the aisles, her petite figure moving quietly through the rows of merchandise. She was described as calm and focused, giving no indication that anything was amiss. But as the hours passed and Patricia didn't return home, her absence became a glaring anomaly. Her friends and family couldn't understand it. Patricia wasn't the type of person to leave without a word. She had a routine she rarely deviated from, and her sense of responsibility was a hallmark of her character. For her to suddenly disappear was completely out of the ordinary. Bob was particularly distraught. He replayed their last conversation over and over in his mind, searching for clues he might have missed. They had spoken about dinner plans and her intention to visit the store, a mundane exchange that gave no hint of what was to come. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The small town was abuzz with speculation. Neighbors whispered theories, some suggesting she had been abducted, while others wondered if she had chosen to leave voluntarily. People questioned whether her outspoken faith might have made her a target. As days turned into weeks, the uncertainty weighed heavily on everyone who knew her. Adding to the mystery was the lack of evidence. No personal items were left behind, no notes or signs of struggle. The surveillance cameras in the store were outdated and failed to capture anything useful. It was as though Patricia had simply vanished into thin air. Her disappearance became a focal point for the local police, who worked tirelessly to uncover any leads. Detectives interviewed store employees, customers, and anyone who might have crossed paths with Patricia that day. They searched nearby wooded areas and vacant buildings but found nothing. Every potential lead seemed to fizzle out, leaving the community with more questions than answers. Bob and Patricia's siblings became the driving force behind the search. Her sister, Gloria, described Patricia as someone who would never willingly cut ties with her family. Gloria joined Bob in holding press conferences and distributing flyers, hoping against hope that someone, somewhere, had seen her. The heartbreak of her absence extended beyond her family. Many in the town felt a personal connection to Patricia, whether from her time as a teacher or her frequent conversations with neighbors. She was a fixture in the community, someone whose presence was taken for granted until it was suddenly gone. What could have possibly happened to Patricia in broad daylight? A question that haunted her family, friends, and the entire town for the next 3 decades. The day Patricia Kopta disappeared began like any other. The summer sun shone brightly over Ross Township as locals went about their routines. At around 2 p.m., Patricia left her house, telling her husband Bob she needed to pick up a few items from the local department store. She didn't seem rushed or stressed, just her usual calm self. She arrived at the store shortly after. Witnesses later recalled seeing her enter through the front doors, wearing a light floral dress and carrying a small handbag. She walked down the aisles, browsing quietly. An employee remembered her pausing near the stationery section, but no one could recall seeing her after that. Patricia didn't make it to the checkout counter, and security cameras, limited and grainy by the technology of the early 1990s, captured only fleeting glimpses of her movements. Beyond that, the footage offered nothing useful. By 6 p.m., when Patricia hadn't returned home, Bob began to worry. At first, he assumed she might have been delayed or had run into someone she knew. But as the hours ticked by, his concern grew. He called her friends, her sister Gloria, and even the department store, but no one had seen or heard from her. By 10 p.m., he decided to drive to the store himself. The parking lot was nearly empty, and the store employees, preparing to close for the night, told him they hadn't noticed anything unusual. The following morning, Bob reported Patricia missing to the Ross Township Police Department. Officers immediately began their investigation, focusing on the department store as the last confirmed location where she had been seen. They interviewed employees and reviewed the limited surveillance footage, hoping to piece together her movements that afternoon. Police organized a search of the surrounding area. Volunteers combed through wooded trails, abandoned buildings, and even nearby waterways. Flyers with Patricia's face and description were plastered on telephone poles and bulletin boards throughout the town. The community rallied around Bob, offering support and assistance in the search. Despite these efforts, the first 48 hours, the most critical time in a missing persons case, yielded no solid leads. Theories about Patricia's disappearance began to emerge. Some speculated she had been abducted, perhaps in the parking lot after leaving the store. Others wondered if she had suffered a medical emergency and wandered off, disoriented. A more unsettling theory suggested that Patricia might have chosen to leave voluntarily, given her deeply spiritual nature and history of discussing apocalyptic visions. However, those closest to her rejected this idea, insisting that Patricia would never abandon her family without a word. As police continued their investigation, they encountered a handful of witnesses who claimed to have seen Patricia after she left the store. One woman reported seeing someone who matched Patricia's description boarding a bus headed out of town. Another witness came forward weeks later, stating they had seen her walking along a rural road about 5 miles from the store. Both leads were thoroughly investigated, but neither provided definitive answers. Strange tips began to trickle in. A man called the police claiming to have seen Patricia being forced into a car, but when pressed for details, his story fell apart. Another individual sent an anonymous letter suggesting Patricia had been taken to an unknown location, but the information couldn't be verified. These false leads not only drained resources but also heightened the frustration and desperation of her family and the investigators. Bob remained the center of attention, as is common in missing person cases. Investigators scrutinized his every move, searching for any inconsistencies in his story. Neighbors whispered about his potential involvement, though there was no evidence to support such claims. Bob cooperated fully, even taking a polygraph test, which he passed. He spent his days distributing flyers, holding press conferences, and working closely with the police to find his wife. The mounting frustration of the unsolved case began to take its toll. Police admitted they were running out of viable leads. The local media, initially invested in covering Patricia's disappearance, started to lose interest as time went on. For the Kopta family, each passing day without answers felt like a lifetime. Despite the lack of progress, Bob refused to give up. He placed ads in newspapers as far away as Puerto Rico, hoping someone might recognize Patricia. He held on to the belief that she was alive, even as hope began to wane for others. Weeks turned into months, and the case grew colder with each passing year. Patricia's name became a haunting memory for the community, a symbol of the unanswered questions that lingered long after the search efforts had ceased. What could have happened to Patricia Kopta on that seemingly ordinary summer day? No one could have imagined that the answer would come decades later, in a place far removed from Ross Township. As the weeks turned into months, the investigation into Patricia Kopta's disappearance began to stall. Despite the relentless efforts of the Ross Township Police Department, there was no evidence, no physical clues, no credible witnesses, and no meaningful leads. It was as if Patricia had vanished into thin air. The department faced mounting pressure from the community and media, but the lack of actionable evidence left them grasping at straws. Missteps in the investigation began to emerge. The outdated surveillance footage from the department store, which might have provided critical clues, was low quality and poorly positioned. Early witness accounts, crucial in the first hours after her disappearance, were not thoroughly vetted, and some potential leads were missed altogether in the chaos of the initial search. The Koptas were devastated, but refused to let the case fade from public memory. Bob Kopta, along with Patricia's sister Gloria, spearheaded media campaigns to keep her story alive. They regularly spoke to local news outlets, organized community events, and distributed flyers far and wide. Bob even used his savings to place ads in national and international newspapers, particularly in Puerto Rico, a place Patricia had always loved. Each advertisement bore the same plea: "Have you seen Patricia? Please help us bring her home." Rumors and theories swirled around Ross Township, with everyone speculating about what could have happened to Patricia. One theory suggested she might have been abducted by a stranger at the store. Given the busy parking lot and multiple exits, it wasn't impossible for someone to have taken her unnoticed. Another theory pointed to her religious fervor, speculating that she might have joined a cult or left voluntarily to pursue her spiritual beliefs. These theories, while plausible to some, were vehemently denied by her family, who knew Patricia as deeply loyal and committed to her loved ones. There were also suspicions closer to home. Bob, as her husband, remained under scrutiny for years. Though he had cooperated fully with police and passed a polygraph test, some in the community couldn't shake the idea that he might have been involved. Bob lived under a cloud of suspicion, forced to defend himself even as he poured his energy into finding Patricia. For him, the whispers and side glances were a cruel twist of fate, adding to the agony of losing his wife. Over the years, numerous sightings of women resembling Patricia were reported. One such tip came from a woman who believed she saw Patricia at a church service several towns away. Investigators followed up, only to discover it was a case of mistaken identity. Another report claimed Patricia had been seen working as a housekeeper in a rural area, but when authorities arrived, the lead fizzled. A particularly strange tip came from someone who claimed Patricia was being held against her will in a remote location. Police investigated thoroughly, but no evidence supported the claim. These false leads took a toll on both the investigators and Patricia's family. Every new report brought a flicker of hope, only to end in crushing disappointment. Despite the setbacks, Bob and Gloria never gave up. They continued to advocate for Patricia, reminding everyone that she was more than just a missing person. She was a sister, a wife, and a beloved member of their family. Law enforcement officers who had worked on Patricia's case over the years shared their frustrations in interviews. One retired detective, who had spent over a decade revisiting the case, described it as the one that kept me awake at night. He spoke of the unanswered questions that haunted him and his lingering regret over the lack of closure for Patricia's family. Another officer shared how the case had impacted his career, driving his determination to improve protocols for handling missing person cases. As the years turned into decades, Patricia's disappearance became a haunting memory for Ross Township. By the early 2000s, her case was largely considered a cold case, though her file remained open. New detectives would occasionally review it, hoping fresh eyes might uncover something overlooked. Yet each review led back to the same frustrating conclusion. There were no leads, no suspects, and no answers. For Bob, life without Patricia was a mix of painful longing and quiet resignation. He never remarried, holding on to the hope that she might one day return. Gloria, too, carried the weight of her sister's absence, often speaking publicly about the impact Patricia's disappearance had on their family. The years of not knowing, of unanswered questions, were a torment they carried daily. Despite the passage of time, Patricia's name remained in the hearts of those who loved her. Her family clung to the hope that one day they would learn the truth. What had happened to Patricia that day in 1992? Where had she gone? And why? These questions hung in the air, unanswered for more. Then 3 decades, until an unexpected breakthrough changed everything. 30 years after Patricia Kopta's disappearance, her case had become a distant memory to many in Ross Township. The file sat on a dusty shelf in the police department, one of many cold cases waiting for answers. But in 2022, an unexpected phone call from over 1,600 miles away would reignite the investigation and lead to an astonishing breakthrough. A social worker at an adult care home in northern Puerto Rico reached out to Interpol with an unusual report. A resident in their care, a woman in her 80s diagnosed with dementia, had begun sharing fragmented details about her life. She mentioned a childhood in Pennsylvania, a religious upbringing, and a surname that sounded distinctly like Kopta. Over the years, the woman had offered small clues, but without documentation or a clear story, her identity remained a mystery. The social worker, intrigued by these fragments, began to search for missing persons cases that matched the woman's limited details. Eventually, they came across the case of Patricia Kopta and reached out to Interpol for assistance. The information was forwarded to the Ross Township Police Department, where the mention of Patricia's name sent shockwaves through the small team. Could this woman, missing for 3 decades, really be alive? Detectives immediately reopened Patricia's case. They began by comparing the details provided by the social worker with the information in her original file. The parallels were uncanny. The age, physical description, religious fervor, and even her love for Puerto Rico, a place Patricia had often spoken of visiting. The pieces were starting to align, but confirmation would require something definitive. Modern technology provided the key. In the 1990s, DNA testing was still in its infancy, but by 2022, it had become a powerful tool for solving even the coldest of cases. Detectives contacted Patricia's surviving family members, including her sister Gloria, and collected DNA samples to compare against the woman in Puerto Rico. It was a tense 9-month process, as forensic scientists meticulously analyzed the samples to ensure accuracy. When the results came in, they confirmed what many had dared to hope. The woman in Puerto Rico was indeed Patricia Kopta. The news stunned her family, the detectives, and the entire community of Ross Township. After 3 decades of questions and heartbreak, they finally had an answer. But the resolution raised as many questions as it answered. Where had Patricia been all these years? Why had she vanished without a word? And what had happened to her in the time since she disappeared? Investigators pieced together Patricia's story with the help of the social worker and care home staff. Shortly after leaving the department store in 1992, Patricia had made her way to Puerto Rico. It's unclear whether she had planned to leave or whether something triggered her decision that day. Once in Puerto Rico, she lived on the streets for several years, relying on the kindness of strangers and her faith to sustain her. Her religious beliefs, which had always been a central part of her identity, became even more pronounced during this time. In 1999, authorities in Puerto Rico found Patricia wandering aimlessly and brought her to the adult care home where she would remain for the next 2 decades. She was diagnosed with dementia, which explained the fragmented nature of her memories and her inability to provide a clear account of her past. Though the care home staff treated her with compassion, her identity remained a mystery until the social worker connected the dots years later. Patricia's family was both relieved and heartbroken. Gloria traveled to Puerto Rico to reunite with her sister, a moment filled with mixed emotions. Seeing Patricia alive after 30 years was a miracle, but it was also a painful reminder of the time they had lost. Bob Copta, who had never remarried, expressed gratitude for the closure, but struggled to reconcile the life they could have shared with the reality of her disappearance. The community of Ross Township was equally stunned by the resolution. For decades, Patricia's case had been a local mystery, a story that symbolized unanswered questions and unresolved grief. Her reappearance brought a bittersweet sense of closure, a reminder of the resilience of hope and the unpredictable nature of life. Patricia's disappearance and rediscovery became a powerful case study in missing persons investigations. It highlighted the advancements in technology that made such breakthroughs possible and underscored the importance of persistence in the face of uncertainty. For her family, it was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, as they worked to reconnect with the sister and wife they had lost so long ago. Patricia's story serves as a testament to the enduring strength of those who refuse to stop searching and the miracles that can happen when least expected. Patricia Copta's case, while resolved, left many lingering questions that continue to provoke reflection and discussion. Though the answers brought her family much-needed closure, the circumstances surrounding her disappearance and the decades she spent away from her loved ones raised important issues about missing person investigations, mental health awareness, and societal challenges in recognizing and addressing vulnerable individuals. One of the most persistent questions is whether Patricia could have been found sooner. Her family and investigators often wonder if the outcome would have been different if the tools available today, like advanced DNA databases and nationwide missing persons registries, had existed in 1992. The limitations of the time, outdated surveillance technology, lack of interagency communication, and the absence of comprehensive databases meant that crucial opportunities to locate Patricia may have been missed. The early investigation also faced scrutiny for potential missteps. While police conducted thorough searches and interviewed witnesses, certain leads were not pursued with the urgency they required. Witness reports of a woman resembling Patricia boarding a bus or walking along rural roads were investigated, but ultimately dismissed when no further evidence was uncovered. Some questioned whether these leads were prematurely abandoned, potentially missing opportunities to track her movements in the days following her disappearance. The handling of Patricia's mental health in the years leading up to her disappearance also raises questions. Those close to her noted that her religious fervor had grown more intense, and she expressed increasing anxiety about catastrophic events. While her behavior was seen as eccentric, it's possible that her struggles went unnoticed or unaddressed in an era when mental health issues were often stigmatized or misunderstood. If more support had been available, could she have received the help she needed to avoid leaving her life behind? While Patricia's case is unique in its resolution, it highlights a broader issue: the unknown fates of countless individuals who go missing every year. In the United States alone, tens of thousands of people are reported missing annually, and many of these cases remain unsolved. Patricia's decision to leave voluntarily and live anonymously raises the question of how many other missing persons might be living under similar circumstances, either by choice or due to circumstances beyond their control. Advocates and investigators have drawn parallels between Patricia's story and other long-term missing persons cases, particularly those involving individuals with mental health struggles. It underscores the importance of looking beyond the assumption of foul play and considering a wider range of possibilities when investigating disappearances. Patricia's case has inspired efforts to revisit other cold cases, particularly those involving individuals who may have chosen to disappear or were unable to communicate their identities. Patricia's disappearance and eventual discovery highlight significant challenges in how missing persons cases are handled, both historically and today. In the 1990s, law enforcement agencies operated with limited technology and resources, often working in silos without the benefit of centralized databases or cross-agency collaboration. This lack of coordination meant that Patricia's case, like many others, was constrained by the boundaries of local jurisdiction. Had there been a stronger network for sharing information across state and international lines, her presence in Puerto Rico might have been discovered much earlier. The case also shines a light on the societal attitudes toward mental health during the time of Patricia's disappearance. In the early 1990s, mental health conditions were often misunderstood, and those struggling were frequently overlooked or dismissed. Patricia's behavior, her increasing anxiety, apocalyptic warnings, and eventual withdrawal from her community might have been early indicators of a deeper issue. However, the stigma surrounding mental health likely prevented her from receiving the support she needed. Today, there is a greater emphasis on mental health awareness and resources, but Patricia's story is a reminder of how far we still have to go. The revelation that Patricia spent decades in a care home, unrecognized and disconnected from her past, raises questions about how vulnerable populations are cared for and tracked. It underscores the need for better systems to identify individuals who cannot communicate their histories and connect them with potential family members. Her story has prompted calls for greater investment in technologies like facial recognition, improved record keeping, and more robust protocols for interagency collaboration. Patricia's case has left an indelible mark on how missing persons investigations are approached. It serves as a powerful example of the importance of persistence and the potential for long unsolved cases to reach resolution through advancements in technology and renewed attention. Her discovery after 3 decades has inspired families of other missing persons to hold on to hope, knowing that closure is possible even after many years. Law enforcement officials who had worked on Patricia's case reflected on the lessons learned. The use of modern DNA technology to confirm her identity served as a powerful reminder of how advancements in science could breathe new life into cold cases. Investigators emphasized the importance of revisiting unresolved cases with fresh eyes, acknowledging that even the smallest detail could lead to a breakthrough. Even with the resolution of Patricia's case, certain questions may never be fully answered. What drove her to leave on that June day in 1992? Did she ever consider returning home, or was her connection to her past completely severed? How did she survive the years she spent living on the streets in Puerto Rico, and what thoughts occupy her mind as she wanders far from the life she had left behind? Patricia's story is a testament to the complexity of human behavior and the mysteries that can surround even the most ordinary lives. It is a reminder that every missing person has a story, and every story is worth pursuing, no matter how much time has passed. Her case stands as both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope, encouraging us to strive for a world where no one is forgotten and every effort is made to bring the lost home. And so, Patricia Copta's incredible story comes to an end, one that spanned 3 decades, 2 countries, and countless unanswered questions. It is a tale of mystery, heartbreak, and an ultimate resolution that no one could have foreseen. Her disappearance challenged law enforcement, devastated her family, and left a community searching for answers. But her eventual discovery offers hope, reminding us all that even the coldest cases can find their way to light. What do you think about Patricia's story? Could anything have been done differently to bring her home sooner? Do you believe this case was handled well, or do you see opportunities for improvement in how missing persons cases are approached? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If you found Patricia's story as gripping as we did, make sure to hit the like button and share this video with friends who enjoy unraveling real-life mysteries. Your support helps us continue to tell these stories and shine a light on the untold narratives of those who have disappeared, been found, and everything in between. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated on all our future videos. We dive deep into the most perplexing cases, uncovering the facts, the theories, and the resolutions that keep us all on the edge of our seats. And there's more where this came from. Click on the next video on your screen, 11 Real Horrifying Murder Cases Decoded. Chodikiar True Crime Stories to uncover another set of chilling and mind-bending mysteries. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, Every mystery deserves to be solved. See you in the next video.